Welcome to the NBAV podcast. Welcome back to NBAV and the NBA Avenue podcast, where we are at the All-Star break. We are post the All-Star game. And this is really the time to look ahead at the final 26, 27 games or so of the season and think ahead who can actually win the NBA championship. I have a list. I was listening to a different podcast a couple of weeks ago, and they highlighted 13 different teams that have a chance to win the finals. And that's just a joke and a disgrace to put out such a list. How can almost half the team actually be able to win the NBA championship? There's no point in time, not even before the season, is there a time where there's 13 teams that have an actual shot to win the title. So what I have, what I have is 9 teams. And I really wanted to make this shorter than 9. I wanted to have it be a really tight list of really the teams who can actually win the title. But I had to keep it at 9. And I'm going to explain why as we go through this. But this is as tight of a list as I could make it with all of the circumstances surrounding all of the teams that I'm going to be talking about now. We can start certainly with the easier ones. And that would start in the Eastern Conference. We'll go East first, then West. If you go East, you have to start off with the Boston Celtics, of course. This is the easiest one. Someone who would say that Boston doesn't have a chance to win the finals this year is living out on an island somewhere, going back to the days of maybe post Larry Bird. I don't know who was on the team post Larry. There must have been at least some break before they got really good again. This is not that time. The Celtics are 43-12. They are 6 games up on the 2 seed, who are currently Cleveland. They're ahead of everyone in both conferences by a nice, comfortable margin. And they have a team that's so complete that their odds of winning the title has to be number 1 over any other team right now. Has to be. Denver, I would say, got slightly worse from last year. They did lose some pieces, right? They lost Bruce Brown off that team. Boston got better. Boston added a couple of massively notable pieces to their team. They are a real championship contender and the championship favorite by such a wide margin. It's not even funny. It's not even close. Leading the team, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. 2 guys who have already been to a finals on a worse roster than what they currently have today. They have the steady and reliable older, but they're not asking as much from Al Horford. He's still there. They have Derek White. It's not his first season on the team anymore. He's there and he's a force. He's a presence. He's steady on offense and on defense. And they added Drew Holiday. On the defensive end, he's a massive difference maker, and he can also knock down the corner 3 and create a bit on the offensive end. He's a massive pickup. Obviously, Porzingis has been phenomenal for them this year in a true revelation, a true surprise that many NBA fans did not see happening to the effect that it has been so successful. And beyond that, you still have good players like Xavier Tillman, who they just picked up. And then they have guys coming off the bench. They have Hauser and Brissett and Cornette. So they, and Pritchard, of course, Jordan Walsh way down there, Mikhailuk. This is a championship roster of the highest order. The second team in the East, Milwaukee. I know that they haven't been having the greatest season ever. I understand. But if I read you the roster, you can't look at that roster and say that this is not a championship roster. I don't care what their record is. I don't care if they are the 8th seed. You can't tell me that the Bucks, current roster is not championship worthy. Go through it quickly. Starting at the top, you have Giannis. One of the best 3 or 4 players in the game. Consensus. And then you have Damian Lillard. Say for it what you will, All-Star Game MVP. He's a lot better than he's shown this season. And then you have Chris Middleton, Giannis' compadre, who was on the championship team. They still have Brook Lopez, Bobby Portis, Pat Connaughton, all members of their previous championship team. Malik Beasley, Pat Beverly, Jay Crowder. Pretty much rounding it out. This is a championship roster. You cannot tell me it's not. And I don't care how many coaches they fired. You have 9 strong. You already have 9 strong in this rotation. It's the same team that you won the championship with. Just take Drew Holiday, send him out, send Damian Lillard in. And then there's still a buyout market, and you just got Pat Beverly, you got Jay Crowder. Jay Crowder looks fine. So I don't think anyone can look at this team. And if we skipped the entire regular season and just started with the playoffs and everyone was 0-0, this Bucks team would be the top 3 or 4 picks from virtually anyone in NBA media. Any fan would take a look at the roster and say, yes, the Bucks are championship contenders. So you have the Celtics, the Bucks, and then the third one in the East. And there's only 3 in the East. All of the other contenders are coming from the West. So teams that have an actual chance to win the NBA title this year, the third one in the East would be the Miami Heat. Where I understand the Heat don't have the most glorious record. They are sitting in 7 right now, technically in a tie for 7 and 8 between them and the Magic, but they already did it one time. They were in a similar, almost exactly the same circumstance 1 year ago. The team is slightly different. It got worse in ways, more shallow in ways, and perhaps stronger in other ways. Maybe they got a little more shallow in the guard positions. Maybe not. I mean, you also have Hero back. He's kind of the wild card wrench in all of this. Is Hero going to play better than Strus? Better than the name is slipping my mind. Guard right now playing for the Lakers, but he hasn't actually played very much this entire year. Little guy. Let's just pull this up for a quick second. Let's just go Lakers roster. I cannot believe I'm forgetting this guy's name. Lakers roster right now. 2023-2024 season, and you have, where is he? Gabe Vincent. All right, all that. The toughest part of the podcast is just remembering the name of one player on the Lakers who hasn't played this entire year. So Gabe Vincent, is Tyler Hero going to be better than those guys or not? Is he going to be far better? Does Jovic have a place on this? There's a couple of questions. Is the newly acquired Terry Rozier going to come up big for them? But no matter which way you slice it, this Miami Heat team needs to be considered. And if you talk to Boston Celtics fans, there's only one team that they're fearful of right now. More than anybody, more than they're afraid of facing the Denver Nuggets in the finals. And that is, the Celtics are afraid of the Miami Heat. For good reason. So those are the 3 teams in the East that can actually win the title. You have the Celtics, the Bucks, and the Heat. That's it. Nobody else has a real shot. And we'll touch on the reasons why no one else has a shot after I go through the Western Conference teams that actually have a chance to win the title. So we have the 3 teams in the East, and then we have 6 in the West. And you have to start it off with the Los Angeles Clippers. The Clippers have their big 3 right now. And it's a big 3 that, as long as they're healthy, you can't look at them and say that this team does not have a shot to win the title. They have a guy in Kawhi Leonard who's already won titles on 2 different teams, and he's having a phenomenal season. So can you look and say that this team... No, of course they can win. This is really an obvious pick based on the way they played for the last 35 games. Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, James Harden. Boom. Norman Powell playing great right now. Phenomenal. PJ Tucker is rotting away on the bench, but you have Zubac with a good season along with how Harden is playing at the point in the pick and roll with Zubac. You have Terrence Mann. Russell Westbrook has been a revelation off the bench. He's just revived himself in this new role, playing less minutes. Coffey's playing much better. And on the bench, you still have Bones Highland and Daniel Tice. So you have a rotation there. Yes, are they top-heavy? Sure. Have they been one of the best teams in the NBA for the last 35 games, which is not a small sample size? Absolutely, yes. Then you go to last year's defending champions. Well, our current defending champions. They won the title last year. They have perhaps the best player in the NBA, Nikola Jokic. They are a real contender in the Western Conference. They're 3 games back of the 1 seed. That's the Denver Nuggets. Jamal Murray elevates his game in the playoffs. Extremely, extremely scary team. Michael Porter Jr. They have Aaron Gordon, right? They have a lot. Reggie Jackson's been okay. Have they been as good as last year? No, but that's to be expected. When you come off the championship, it's to be expected that you may not have as well of a regular season as the defending champs, but you would hope that you have proven that you can win in the postseason already. So when the postseason comes knocking, hopefully the Nuggets answer the door. Certainly a real contender. And that's where, if I had to shorten this list to 5 teams, I probably would have shortened it to the 5 that we already mentioned, the Celtics, Bucks, Heat, Clippers, and Nuggets. But there are a few more teams that I absolutely had to mention. And we're going to go out of the order of the standings in this case. And the next team that I'm going to put with legitimate championship odds are the Dallas Mavericks. And this one is probably the most contentious, that if anyone would look at this list, they would probably say, how can you say that the Mavericks have a real shot when there are other teams that you're leaving off who have much better records? That's okay. Dallas has one of the top 3 or 4 players in the NBA. You have to factor that in. They have Doncic. They have Kyrie. Kyrie's had a quiet, productive season. He's missed a lot of games. But as long as he's quiet and he's playing well when he does play, that's phenomenal for Dallas. So you have Luka and Kyrie. You have Tim Hardaway Jr., who's had just a spectacular season. And I know it's not in every single game, right? He's not the most consistent guy, but he has been on some hot streaks so far this season that have won them a lot of games in the absence of some of their best players. So you have Luka, Kyrie, Hardaway. You have Derek Lively, who's been awesome for them this season. And at the beginning of the season, they brought in, along with guys who they had from the previous year, they had Dwight Powell already. They had Maxi Kleber, who just continues to gel with everybody there. He's good. He's solid bench guy. They brought in Dante Exum for the defense, and he was good in the limited sample size we had until he got injured. But along with Derek Lively, they now bolstered the team, adding P.J. Washington, adding Daniel Gafford. And this takes the team from a fringe playoff team who can give a good run against anybody to a team that can really go contend with the big boys. Luka, Kyrie, Hardaway Jr., P.J. Washington, Gafford, Kleber, Derek Lively, Josh Green, Powell, Exum, Derek Jones Jr., Markieff Morris, Jaden Hardy. I just listed 12 guys. Their playoff rotation is not going to be 12. It's going to be less. It's maybe going to be 9. Maybe 8 who actually end up playing real minutes. But they have insurance. They have everything they need. And when you have the player who can push it over the top for you, and then you have Kyrie as the sidekick, where Kyrie has experience winning championships as a sidekick. He did it with LeBron James when James was at the top of his game, and now he's going to get to do it, a chance to do it with Luka when Luka's at the top of his game. And then you have an assistant to the assistant in Tim Hardaway Jr. And then you have all the remaining pieces that you would need to be a real contender. This Dallas Mavericks team cannot be slept on. They are real contenders. So there you have 3 in the East, 3 in the West. So far we hit the Clippers, the Nuggets, and the Mavericks. And then after that, I was on the fence, but you have to, at least I felt I had to include the Phoenix Suns. I just couldn't say that they don't have a legitimate shot at winning the title. Now, do I really think they will win the title? It's hard to say. A lot of it really comes down to health. But you can't really factor health into it too much, because if you start factoring health in, it changes the entire conversation. But you have Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker at the top. And then beyond that, you have Grayson Allen, who's had a great year. They just brought in Royce O'Neal. Eric Gordon is hit or miss on the right night. They brought in Roddy. They have Bol deep on the bench, Eubanks on the bench, Okogie, who is, sporadic, tries to give some good effort. And then they have, obviously, Nurkic, their center. And the real problem with this team is the rebounding and the defense. That defensive anchor in the middle, Kevin Durant has to end up picking up a lot of the slack for Nurkic, or when Nurkic is out of the game, they really struggle on the defensive end. And Nurkic is not even that amazing of a defender. That's their problem. And that's why I would say they don't have a shot, if I was going to take that side of the argument. That's their most glaring flaw. It's the rebounding and the defense inside around Nurkic and that center position, and with who backs up Nurkic. But at the end of the day, I just couldn't take them out. There was a line where when you have Beal, Booker, Durant, Nurkic, Grayson Allen, it's very hard to say that they don't have a legitimate chance to win it. And look, they have now Thaddeus Young coming over. He's going to help them a little bit. He can play in the playoffs with them. They can potentially sign one more guy. And you have to give them a shot at it. You can't say that Kevin Durant, where he almost made it a few years ago, they almost beat the Bucks when Durant was on Brooklyn. It's very hard to say right now that Durant, as the leader with Devin Booker, playing as well as he is, the 27-year-old, top of his game, if he's hot in the playoffs, you just really can't say that they don't have a shot. So you got to include the Suns in my book. And then there's two more teams in the West. And those are the two, the nemesis is the teams who have a checkered history between LeBron James and Steph Curry, and that will be the Los Angeles Lakers and the Golden State Warriors. And I just feel you have to include both of these teams because they've been there and done that. And when you have LeBron, I understand. The LeBron would be perhaps the reason why they can't win and also the reason why they can win. LeBron demands the ball a lot. He doesn't give it to you on the defensive end like he used to. And for the amount of plays that he can't really go all out and what he no longer has to give on defense, but for the amount of time that he needs the ball in his hands, you can definitely make a case that he's going to hinder them more than he'll help them. But at the same time, they beat the Warriors last season in the playoffs. The Warriors were coming off a series where they beat the Kings. So right now, if you look at it and you say the Lakers could beat the Warriors, they could beat the Kings, the Lakers could certainly beat teams like the Pelicans, and they can go toe-to-toe with the Suns, and they could give any of these, the Timberwolves, the Thunder, they could give any of them a run for their money. Maybe you would take the Lakers, maybe you wouldn't. But if the Lakers could beat that many teams and they get hot at the right time, you have to say that if Anthony Davis is anchoring the defense well, and LeBron is playing well in a little bit less minutes, Russell can get real hot. Reeves is pretty consistent. He should be good in the playoffs. If you can get, I just can't remember his name today. If you can get the same player, this one guy who's playing for the Lakers right now, let's just pull the Lakers roster back up. If you can get good old Gabe Vincent back, and he gives you a little something, it's just hard to say that the Lakers don't have a shot. And not just that they don't have a fringe shot, they have a real chance. The Lakers have a chance if they can get it all going at the right time. They're not going to be the betting favorite, but they're at the bottom of this list. And in this list of 9 teams, the Lakers and the Warriors are at the bottom of it. Maybe the Lakers are the full bottom. Maybe the Warriors are. But then you move on to the Warriors, and you have Steph and Clay and Draymond. And you have Looney, who's been a part of these teams already. And you have Chris Paul, who should be coming back. And hopefully, he definitely has playoff experience on his side. How can you say that the Warriors don't have a chance to win the title? They certainly do. We've seen an 8 seed like the Miami Heat make it to the finals. If there's any time in history where the playoff seeding matters less, it's right now. Playoff seeding is at an all-time irrelevant status. Steph Clay, Chris Paul, Andrew Wiggins can turn it back on. Defense and offense, Draymond Green, Gary Payton, Kevon Looney, Kuminga, Moses Moody, Pajemski, Saric, Trace Jackson Davis. You can't look at that roster and, again, skip the regular season, tell me the Warriors are in the playoffs. Look at the roster. You would be picking them as one of the top 7 or 8 teams that can win the title. That's the truth. That is the full truth. So going again, reviewing our list, Celtics, Bucks, Heat in the East. Clippers, Nuggets, Suns, Mavericks, Lakers, Warriors in the West. These are the teams that can win the title. It's only 9 teams. That's it. It's not half the league. 9 teams have a shot. And if you want to say which teams have the best shot, Celtics, Bucks, Heat, Clippers, Nuggets, Mavericks. Those are the teams with the best shot. The Suns are going to need absolute full health to have a chance, and even then, it's rough with what Nurkic gives you in the rebounding department and not having anyone else to rely on in that department. And with the Lakers, you're going to have to hit everything at the right time, and the same for the Warriors. So in terms of the teams that have the best shot, it's 6 teams. Celtics, Bucks, Heat, Clippers, Nuggets, Mavericks. And the Heat, based on the way they look right now, the Bucks, based on the way they look right now, you could shorten that up if you want to give odds. But I would say Celtics, Bucks, Heat, Clippers, Nuggets, Mavericks. Those are the 6, and then the Suns, Lakers, Warriors are the other 3 that I'm going to give a shot to. Now there are some other teams that were close, but they didn't quite make the cut. And fans from different teams are listening to this, and they're wondering how in the world is my team not a part of this? And the first one is the Cleveland Cavaliers, the 2 seed in the Eastern Conference. Now, why don't they have a shot to win it? Because they're not going to beat a lot of teams in the playoffs. Frankly, the Cavaliers are not going to beat the Knicks. They didn't beat them last year, and they could win 100 games in a row. I don't think they're going to beat the Knicks. I think that the Knicks are going to take away Donovan Mitchell in the playoffs. They're going to be heavily reliant on Garland to win these games for them, and they're going to need their 2 big men inside, Mobley and Allen, to really come to play. And they're going to have to play amazingly well, unlike what they did last season, where they came up real short in the playoffs, real short. So I don't think the Cavs can beat the Knicks, and I certainly wouldn't pick them to beat the Heat, the Bucks, or the Celtics. That's just too many teams. And there's other teams that could give the Cavs a good run for their money too. The Pacers. The Sixers if Embiid is healthy. There are a lot of teams that are going to give the Cavaliers problems, just too many. The Cavs, look, good regular season team, close but no cigar. They don't have a shot to win the title. Then you have the New York Knicks, and as great of a story as the Knicks are, as amazing of a player as Brunson is, as amazing as the OG Anunoby trade has been, as great of a move as it is bringing Bogdanovich and also Burks for the end of the rotation, and as great as Ochoa has looked, and as amazing as Hartenstein has played, the Knicks are one short. They're that one key number 1 or, 1B player to Jalen Brunson. They either need someone to lead the team as another massive scorer, or to play in tandem with Brunson in a better way than Julius Randle does. They're so close, but they're one away. And as much as it pains all Knicks fans and anyone who enjoys watching good, hard-played basketball under Tom Thibodeau, unfortunately, the Knicks are going to have to beat the Celtics. And it's going to be a tough matchup, and it's going to be a bitter pill to swallow. It's going to be painful to watch the Knicks go against Kristaps Porzingis playing on the Celtics. And this isn't going to be a case where Porzingis is going to have a ton of pressure on his shoulders, because the Celtics just have so much firepower that there's no pressure on Porzingis. He just gets to go out and play basketball. He's not a top featured guy on the team. He's a guy who comes in and spots. He plays defense. He tries to block shots. He gets open 3-pointers. He gets to take the ball in the post with a height advantage. He gets to take high percentage shots. The Celtics are set on offense and defense without him, and he's a real glorified cherry on top of the banana split. That's what Porzingis is. So the Knicks fans will boo the garbage out of him, and it's just not going to matter. This Knicks team has a couple of teams that they just can't beat. Moving on to the Sixers, the next team, they just don't have enough to make the cut, even with Embiid healthy. They still won't beat 4 or 5 teams in the East. I can't tell you the Sixers would beat the Knicks. There's a good chance they would not. Would the Sixers beat the Cavs? They wouldn't beat the Celtics. They wouldn't beat the Bucks. They probably wouldn't beat the Heat. Who can the Sixers definitively beat? Who can you guarantee me they'll beat? They're not even going to be a top seed anymore, now that Embiid's not going to be there for the next while. And they've proven they barely win any games without him. But even with him, they still wouldn't be a real contender this year. Give me MVP caliber Joel Embiid in the playoffs. They still don't have it. In the ends of the close games in the fourth quarter, Embiid is going to come up a little short. No matter who's on the team currently, it's just not enough. I can't buy in enough to Tobias Harris and Kelly Oubre. I can't do it. Kyle Lowry is not going to be the difference maker. It's not going to help them that they have campaign. Not enough to make them a title contender. They can be on the fringe. They can try and they will fail, and it'll be another tough offseason for Embiid. They do not have a shot to win the title. And then moving on to the teams that didn't make the cut in the West, there's 4 teams. Starting with the Timberwolves. They're terrible in close games. They can't win close games. And most of these playoff games, outside of maybe the first round, if they're lucky, are going to be close games. And there's too much confusion around who gets the ball in crunch time. I don't trust them. I don't trust the Timberwolves. They really don't have a shot. Towns and Edwards in this current state, with the amount of games they blow in the end of a close game in the final 3 or 4 minutes of the fourth quarter, they've shown that they do not have what it takes this season to make it in the playoffs. They need to restructure the roster a bit, take Towns out of there, or bring in some other guys. I don't see how they could do it unless they get rid of Towns, but this is not a championship team. They're not going to make it to the championship. They're not going to win the championship. It's not time for them yet. There are big changes that have to go down in Minnesota. There's too much confusion of who's going to get the ball. And they're too bad in the close game. And too bad for you guys. Too bad for Minnesota. I'm sorry. They don't have a shot to win the chip this year. You have the other team up there at the top of the Western Conference, and that's the Oklahoma City Thunder. But they don't have a chance to win the title because they're simply not deep enough. Gilgeous-Alexander is unbelievable, and Jalen Williams has just been incredible, but he's never played in a playoff game. And Gilgeous-Alexander and Jalen Williams would have to be the second coming of Durant and Westbrook out there in OKC. They would have to play like Shaq and Kobe. I understand a very different comparison, but just in terms of the impact they would have to have on the game, in order for them to win a title this year, it would have to be just ridiculous. And it's not going to happen. Their team is just too shallow. Their accomplishments on what they've done so far in the regular season are unbelievable. It's insane to see what this Oklahoma City Thunder team has done, how consistent they've been. They're 37-17. They win almost 70% of their ball games. They're in the 2 seed. They're ahead of the Denver Nuggets and the Clippers. And they don't have a comparable roster. They don't have guys who can shoot at the end of close ball games. They rely so heavily on very young players like Jalen Williams, and they rely on Dort to connect at a really high clip. They are relying on Josh Giddey, and when it comes down to it, he's not a great shooter. Chet is a big part of these games as a rookie. They rely on Cason Wallace. They rely on Isaiah Joe to hit those threes. You got to stop thinking. If you're an NBA fan, it's time to stop thinking of, well, how can you say that they don't have a chance to win the title? Look at what they did in the regular season. You need to be able to not get swayed too much by the regular season, whether a team is at the top of the standings or whether a team is near the lower part of the standings. Because last season we saw what the Heat did, and there's been a million examples of high seeds who don't win in the playoffs. Right? We don't need a. I'm sure if we look back at the last 10 years, how many? First of all, only one team wins the title. So you're having automatically one seed every single year who loses. And the Thunder, they're just not reliable enough. Again, at the end of close games, similar to Minnesota, but a little bit differently. They don't have as many scoring options. The Minnesota Timberwolves have a logjam where they don't know who is their best player, even though it's fairly obvious at this point. But he's been a little lackluster compared to the way it looked like he would be this season if you were basing it off of the limited games he had in last playoffs. And I'm talking about it the way Anthony Edwards was playing in the playoffs last season. You would think that this year he would be more dominant at the end of the close ball game and he would take over there. But that hasn't been the case. He's deferred a little bit too much. He's been a little bit too deferential about giving up the ball to Karl Anthony Towns, a player who we thought was going to be firmly planted into the 2 role, and now it's less clear. It's more murky. And you have Gilgeous-Alexander. How high can he soar? Nobody knows, but Gordon Hayward, they added him at the deadline. But I'll tell you, no one in Charlotte is missing Mr. Glass, Gordon Hayward. And where I originally thought it was a pretty good move for them, the more I think about it, it really shows a lot about a player when the fans are happy to get rid of him. And I know that Grant Williams went from Dallas and he went over to Charlotte and they won a few games, but nobody in Dallas is missing Grant Williams right now. And nobody in Charlotte is missing Gordon Hayward. And the Thunder are missing some pieces. They're a few pieces down from being able to contend for the title. So take their accomplishments with a grain of salt. It's a bright future, but a title is a lot to ask from this cast of characters, and they can't be seriously considered a real contender to win the NBA title, at least not this year. The Pelicans, they just can't be taken seriously. And then the last team is the Sacramento Kings. They are inconsistent, and they're worse than they were last year. They don't have it figured out. They don't have their rotations figured out. It's too up and down. Fox hasn't been as dependable as he was last season. Monk is awesome. Sabonis has games where he puts up massive stats. He has games where it seems like he holds them back. It's hard to know. And they don't... Keegan Murray, up and down. You would think he'd be more dependable. Harrison Barnes has been Harrison Barnes. And they don't have it figured out right now. I can't put them as a serious contender where they had a great series last year against Golden State. They really did. It was a series they probably could have won, to be frank. But if they are a worse team than last year, and they've also never won, they've never done what Golden State has done, they don't have that pedigree, I cannot put the Kings into that sphere. It takes a lot to take a team that's currently sitting in the 8th seed and say that they have a chance to win the title. Now, the Lakers and the Warriors are the exceptions to the rule. The Mavericks are sitting at 7, but they have one of the best players in the game. The Kings are sitting at 8, and they don't. If you look at that 7, 8, 9, 10, the Mavericks, the Kings, the Lakers, and the Warriors, the Kings probably have the worst chance at winning of all those teams. Who would the Kings beat in a playoff series? Would they beat Golden State? Would they beat the Lakers? Would they beat the Mavericks? Would they beat the Suns, Nuggets, Clippers, Thunder, Timberwolves? I don't know who the Kings would beat. Maybe they'd beat the Timberwolves or the Thunder. I don't know, but there's too many teams that they can't beat. And they're inconsistent. And they're going into a free agency for Malik Monk, and it'll be interesting to see if they can retain him, but that's about next season. They have problems to work on meanwhile. They haven't had the season like they did last year. They're not in a 2 seed. And they're not going to win the title this year. So there you have it. I mean, what I just did right now was I made a concise list. I think this is truthful. These are the 9 teams that really have a chance to win the NBA title. The Celtics, Bucks, and Heat. The Clippers, Nuggets, Mavericks, Suns, Lakers, and Warriors. And if you wanted to put this list and say who are the top 6 contenders for the title, Celtics, Bucks, Heat. Clippers, Nuggets, Mavericks. 3 from the East, 3 from the West. And then the wild card contenders in the West, the wild cards, the Suns, barring, they need the health and they need the more consistent rebounding. The Lakers, they need to get hot at the right time. And they need also health. And the Warriors, of course, need health. They need Draymond not to do anything stupid. And the Warriors maybe have even a better shot than the Lakers, maybe a better shot than the Suns, if you just fast forwarded to the playoffs and said that the Warriors were in there. And there you have it. That's it. I can't take the Kings seriously or the Pelicans. I'm not giving the Thunder or the Timberwolves a chance. The Sixers have no shot. The Knicks and Cavs are close, but they're not close enough. And that really rounds out the list. So this is not a crazy, ridiculous list of giving another 4 or 5 teams a 0.5% chance. These are the teams who could really win it. And I only want to talk about teams that can actually win the title in the conversation about teams that can win the title. We're NBAV. Follow us on social at NBAV and NB Avenue. Email the show with your questions and comments at nbavenue@yahoo.com. We are your source for a great time every time. And until next time, we are out.